Please be seated. The court is now in session. The floor will be given to the prosecution to put question to this witness. You may proceed.
Good morning, Your Honours. Good morning, Counsel, and good morning, Mr. Mayor Swan. Mr. President, if I can just address an issue of timing as we commence. We were allocated a day and a half, as Your Honours indicated yesterday, and we're keeping track of our time. We've thus far spent 1 hour and 33 minutes or thereabouts, which would leave some 5 hours and 40 minutes out of our allocation. That would mean that we would, between us and the civil parties, we would continue to examine today, and there would be 1 more hour left on Monday, subject, of course, to any interruptions or delays. With that, I'll proceed with my examination.
It is unlikely that would be the appropriate time allocation. You will have only 1 day allocation today for both you and the lead co-lawyers, unless there is an exceptional circumstances where potential questions need to be put through this question. It does not mean the 1.5 day sessions allocated to you and to the lead co-lawyers meant you will occupy the hours or the sessions based on the hours. The time allocation is based on the session, morning session and afternoon session. This time allocation would mean that parties need to strive hard to put more potential questions to the witness rather than repetitive questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. We note and respect the ruling. I was simply proceeding on the basis that we started late and not at half point yesterday, but I respect the ruling. I'll move on. Mr. Vaughan, yesterday when we broke, one of the areas that we were discussing were the battles around the city of Udong, and also other battles that you had taken part in along National Road 5. And I just want to take a brief a moment to discuss with you some of the battles which appear to have taken part in early 1973, and see if you can confirm for us some of the documentary evidence, or if it accords with your recollections. Your Honours, I have document E3/637. It has been referred to in court in the past. It's a statement attributed to Mr. Khieu Samphan and Hu Yun and Hu Nim, and it discusses the advances in the battlefield, and specifically along National Road 5. With your leave, I would show it to the witness and read a brief paragraph simply to see if the battles discussed here are those he took part in.
Yes, you may proceed.
The relevant ERNs are in Khmer 00442-329, in French 00752-171, and in English 00740-933-2934. Mr. Vaughan, the court officer is showing you the relevant page, and under number 3 is the section that I'm going to read from. I'll just read a couple of passages in the interest of time. And if you could just read or listen to the interpretation and let me know whether you recall these particular battles. Quote, "As to battlefields along National Road number 5, the Kampuchean People's Liberation Armed Force is continuing to smash the enemy from the south of Kampong Chnang and from Kampong Chnang to Sala Lek Pram. I will skip a couple of sentences just to proceed as quickly as we can. A few lines down, this says, according to the interim statistics, we have smashed, injured, killed, deserted, and made prisoners of war 1,050 enemies at the battlefields of Bantay Mir, Kampong Chnang, and Prey Khmer along National Road number 5. Additionally, our militia squads in the battlefields along National Road number 5 have jointly smashed 120 enemies." And I'll pause there. Mr. Vaughan, do you recall these particular battles and the victories in the battlefield being described?
Yes, I can recall some.
And to the extent that you recall, are these accurate descriptions of some of the advances that were being made?
Yes, that is correct.
As I said, the document towards the end seems to indicate that it was a review as at January 1973. Do you recall what position Mr. Khieu Samphan held at that time?
At that time, I did not know what position he held.
And just one final question on this document. Do you know how this information was communicated from the battlefields towards people such as Mr. Khieu Samphan?
I cannot quite get your question.
I will rephrase. You've confirmed that some of this information as to the situation in the battlefields is accurate. It is provided here by or attributed to Mr. Khieu Samphan. And my question is, do you know how that information was communicated from the battlefield where you were to people such as Mr. Khieu Samphan?
regarding the transmission of this information, it was done through a kind of a radio communication. It's by a mobile communication, radio communication.
So do I understand correctly that you would communicate information from the battlefield to others, and that information would reach people such as Khieu Samphan?
Yes, it was done by a radio communication.
Who did you communicate your information to?
I relate the information via radio communication up to the division.
We'll move forward now to the events in Udong, which you said yesterday took place either in 1973 or 1974. And you discussed yesterday how people had fled to the liberated zones and how arrangements were being made in the rear for those people. I just have a few questions on that before we leave that topic, and a couple of documents. Firstly, when you entered Udong, were there still any civilians left in the city at that point?
At the time of the liberation of Udong, there were no civilians. They all had left to the liberated zones.
And do you recall how long before your entry into Udong the population had crossed over to the liberated zone?
The people had already left to the liberated zones, which were not that far. It was about 8 kilometers away.
Do you recall which places the civilians were being settled in, which zone?
At that time, zones were not yet set up. There were divisions along National Road number 5, and at the rear, there were villages inside the liberated zones.
Very well. Just while we're on Udong, and while we're discussing the situation there, were any Khmer Republic soldiers or officials captured during the fall of Udong as your troops advanced?
At my target, we did not arrest any or capture any soldier that is from the west, but I did not know about what happened at the east direction.
Just to see if we can explore those facts briefly a little bit further, Your Honours, another document which discusses the fall of Udong, in this case, is E3/167. It is a broadcast by the Information Bureau of the United National Front of Cambodia, dated the 11th of April 1974. With your leave, I will give the witness a hard copy and read a very brief passage again, which describes the fall of Udong.
President, yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you deliver the hard copy document from the prosecutor for the witness examination?
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, we're not showing these documents on the screen simply to move on quickly. The relevant ERNs are Khmer 005964141, French S 0000122, and English 002800586. This is a speech given by Mr. Khieu Samphan in his capacity as Deputy Prime Minister on the 10th of April 1974 at a reception. I should correct that. I believe the speech was given on the 5th of April at a reception in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. A very short passage relates to our discussion, Mr. Vaughan. And this is the passage, quote, "On the contrary, the Cambodian People's National Liberation Armed Forces attacked the enemy forcefully and are now solidly implanted at the very gates of Phnom Penh. And Phnom Penh itself, the last hideout of the traitors, has become a burning battlefield under the increased pressure of our People's National Liberation Armed Forces. On 18 March, our People's National Liberation Armed Forces liberated another city, Udong, by annihilating all the puppet soldiers there, along with their reinforcements. In other words, over 5,000 enemies were eliminated, 1,500 of whom were captured." Mr. Vaughan, does that account refresh your memory at all in relation to the capture of enemy soldiers? Here it appears a number of 1,500 is given.
I did not know about the number, but there were dead soldiers there. But I did not know the exact figure of the casualties or those who were captured.
Did you know anything about those captured, where they were taken, or what happened to them?
No, I did not know about that.
And one final document on Udong before we move on to the battles in Phnom Penh. And this is to explore further the situation of the civilian population there. Your Honours, the next document I have is E3/194. It is a United States cable containing a press summary. It's issued in July 1974, and again I have a hard copy for the witness with your leave, and I'll give it to him and read a very brief passage describing the events in Udong.
President, yes, you may proceed. Court officer, could you assist in taking the document from the prosecution for the witness examination?
Thank you, Mr. President. The relevant ERNs are Khmer 007095524, French 007265884, and English 004128334. And this passage starts at number 2. And this is what it says, quote, GKR, which may be a reference to the government of the Khmer Republic. So continuing, GKR announces capture of Udong though city devastated and all of its 100 monasteries destroyed or damaged. Then it continues, Udong's 30,000 civilians were marched away when rebels overran town. And then a little bit further down, military sources say about 1,300 rebels and 100 GKR soldiers, KIA, meaning killed in action, I assume, in a 2-month effort to recapture Udong. Mr. Vaughan, if I read this correctly, it seems to be describing a recapture of Udong by Khmer Republic forces. Do you recall that event?
I can recall about the liberation of Udong, but I did not know about the captured soldiers.
This document seems to suggest that some 30,000 civilians had been marched away when the Khmer Rouge troops took the town. Does that accord with your recollection?
I can recall that people left, but as to the exact number of the people, I cannot say.
And just one more question on that. To your understanding, did all of those people leave and go to the liberated zones voluntarily, of their own free will?
Bye.
It is my knowledge that the people did not want to go, but we had to force them to go in order to avoid the fighting.
Were you given any order to that effect to move them, to force them to leave?
was no order. They left by themselves.
Very well. I'll move on in the interest of time. Now, returning to the battles for Phnom Penh and the events immediately preceding the 17th of April 1975, you discussed with my colleague a meeting between the General Staff and various commanders from the zone. In your first OCIJ interview, which is E3/424, in question and answer number 3, you said that the commanders of the military from the eastern, southwestern zones and so on attended the meeting with the General Staff, such as Ta Son Sen and Ta Nun Chia, who conducted the meeting with the division commanders from all zones. And then you described that the division commanders conducted further meetings to disseminate the information to regiment commanders. Can I ask you first, what was the General Staff?
In that meeting, I initially did not know that it was held by the General Staff, and I did not attend the meeting myself. The information was relayed to me by the division commander.
I understand. My question is slightly different. What was the General Staff? What was its role?
In my understanding, the General Staff had the overall command on the division across the country.
Who, apart from Ta Son Sen and Ta Nun Chia, was in that General Staff?
There was Tam Mok as well.
And how often did divisions such as yours receive orders or instructions from the General Staff?
Response. In time of war and when we were in the battlefield, we did not receive instruction from the General Staff. We listened to the order of the division commander, namely from Tam Mok and Ta Si.
And is Ta Si the same person as Chu Chet?
Before I called him Ta Si, and that was the name which was normally called during the 3 years and 8 months and 20 days period. But later on I found out that this was the name belonged to Chu Chet.
Thank you. You've described how you how meetings were conducted to disseminate information following the meeting with the General Staff. What specific orders were you given in the meeting that you attended?
បាទក្នុង
Response. In the meeting, the division would receive orders from the General Staff, and then the commander of the division would continue to circulate information to the structure, military structure down below the line, but the meeting normally did not take place in a proper venue. They were normally convened under the trees or so.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to keep moving through this quickly. You said in that same statement, in the passage that we were looking at earlier, that there was an aim to attack and liberate on the 18th of April 1975. Was that a date designated by the General Staff, as far as you know?
បាទក្នុងការដែល
As for the aim to attack to liberate Phnom Penh by the 17th of April 1975 was determined by the General Staff. Rather, it was designated to liberate Phnom Penh on the 18th of April. It was the decision by the General Staff, but in reality, we could liberate Phnom Penh on the 17th of April 1975.
In that same passage, you also describe how the army was tasked to open attacks into Phnom Penh, but strictly instructed by the upper echelon not to counterattack the enemy who raised white flags. Who is the upper echelon? Who were you referring to when you used the words upper echelon?
Response. The upper echelon referred to those who were in the senior command, such as Tamok, Sun Sen, and those who were above him, them.
And do you know who was above those in General Staff? Who was above Tamok and Sun Sen?
Back then, I only knew Tamok, Son Sen, and Khieu Samphan. I did not know any others.
What was your understanding of Mr. Khieu Samphan's role at that point in time?
Response. I did not meet him in person, but I heard from the radio broadcast that he was the head of the Democratic Cambodia National Reunion Front.
Now, moving towards the actual entry into Phnom Penh, can you tell us first how many divisions there were from the southwest, apart from your division?
បាទ ខ្ញុំដឹងថា
I knew that there were other divisions. I did not know the names of those divisions, but there were divisions sent from the southwest, from the east, and from the north zones. They were fighting their ways from various directions into Phnom Penh, but I do not recall the names of those divisions.
Were those other divisions commanded by the General Staff, as far as you know?
បាទ
Response. As far as the order was concerned by the division, they received direct instruction from Tamok and Son Sen.
Thank you. How large was your regiment on that day, on the 17th of April, as you advanced into Phnom Penh?
បាទកង
In my regiment, we were ordered to attack from Bojantong into Phnom Penh, and there were also troops under my command who were fighting from the direction of Stung Min Chey and Obaik Om.
Thank you. How many troops in total in those three spearheads?
There were 600 troops.
And exactly when did your troops enter the city of Phnom Penh?
បាទ
Response.
I'll just repeat the question. Exactly when, at what time, and on what day did your troops enter Phnom Penh?
Response. It was on the 17th of April 1975.
Was it in the morning? Do you recall a time of day that this happened?
Response. I do not recall it exactly when of the day, but it could have been some time around 9 o'clock in the morning.
And as you entered with your soldiers, did other divisions enter at about the same time, or earlier or later? Could you describe for us when other divisions entered the city?
Response. Actually, my division, together with other divisions, entered Phnom Penh later than the North Zone division, and I was entering Phnom Penh later than the division from the East Zone as well.
Were you given directions as to where you should go? Was there a place where you should go to station immediately when you entered Phnom Penh?
Bad.
It was I was instructed to fight our way in order to occupy the headquarters of Lon Nol soldiers.
And did you reach the headquarters of Lon Nol soldiers?
Bad.
No, I did not reach that headquarters, but the division from the north and the east zone reached there.
And where did you go on the 17th of April? Where in the city did you go?
Bad.
My troops were stationed west of Borikela complex.
And at that location, how long did you stay west of Borikela?
Bad.
Response: I stayed there for only one full day.
You told my colleague yesterday that when you entered the city, it was quiet. Does that mean that there was no fighting anymore between your troops and the troops of the Lon Nol army?
Would you mind repeating your question?
Of course, thank you. You told my colleague yesterday that the city was quiet when you entered. My question is, was there any fighting on the 17th of April as you entered the city? Did the Lon Nol soldiers continue to resist?
Bad.
No, there was no fighting anymore. There was no armed classes anymore. People who Phnom Penh dweller was staying inside their homes quietly.
You said you stayed in the city on that day, the 17th of April. Did you see any civilians leave their homes? Did you see them anywhere in the streets on that day?
Bad.
Respond: no, I did not see civilians loitering in the streets. They stay in their homes.
You told my colleague yesterday that you had heard that people were required to leave the city, and you let them leave as they were being evacuated. Did you see any people leaving the city on the 17th of April?
Bad.
Response: I saw them leave the city because I stayed in the city for one day, and then Tamok ordered that I withdrew the troop to Stengmenchai. Then a few days later, I saw people being evacuated out of the city through National Route number 3 and number 4.
Thank you. Who told you that people were required to leave the city?
Bad.
I did not hear from any leaders. I only heard from people who were marching out of the city, and those civilians told me that they were required to leave the city.
Did you ask anyone as to the reason why they were leaving?
No, I did not ask. I heard from the people that they were required to leave the city, so I just learned from those civilians.
Was anyone permitted to stay in the city? Any of the civilians?
That I do not know.
In the following days and months, did you ever find out why it was that the population of the city was required to leave?
No, I did not know. I did not know the plan to evacuate people out of the cities.
I understand that you were not informed, you tell us, about the plan, but in the days after the 17th of April, in the weeks that followed, in the months that followed, did you ever discuss the evacuation and why it happened?
I heard from the division commander as well, but there was no formal notification or information sharing in a meeting session or so. They only told me that the city people would be evacuated out of the city for a week or so, and once Phnom Penh was very well organized and it returned to normal situation, they would be returned back.
Thank you. Just one last question on that. When did the division commander tell you that people would be evacuated for 1 week?
I do not recall the date, but it was sometime after the evacuation of people out of the city. It was about a week after the evacuation, then he told me.
Thank you. You were then directed by Tamok to leave the city. Where did you station next, and what were your responsibilities?
បាទ ក្រោយពី
Following the liberation of Phnom Penh, I was instructed to withdraw my troops out of Phnom Penh. And then at that time, my roles and my troops' role were doing farming in Kampot province. Kambo corrects interpreter, Kambol.
You told us that you were required to leave within 1 week. Where were you for that 1 week between the 17th of April and 1 week after that?
We were doing farming in Kambol. We have not even harvested the crops, but we were then ordered to move our troops to Kampong Trach. We, the entire regiment, were transferred to Kampong Trach, some 600 soldiers under my command.
Now, you told the investigators in your first statement, this is E3/424 in question and answer number 6, that after being stationed in Kampong Trach in Kampot, that the upper echelon transferred your regiment to Kokong province for 3 years. Do you recall the month and the year that you were transferred to Kokong?
I left for Kampong Trach in 1975. I do not recall the months when I left for Kampong Trach. Then I left Kampong Trach for Kokong province. It was sometime in 1977. I do not recall the months either.
I just want to make sure we have the right periods. You went to Kampong Trach in 1975, and then you said you went to Kokong in 77. And I'm just looking at your second OCIJ statement, E3/80, in question and answer number 1. You said that you went to work in Kokong in December 1976. Are you able to recall more precisely the year? How long were you stationed in Kampot before you went to Kokong?
I was stationed in Kampot province for about a year. If I remember correctly, it was about 10 months or so in Kampot province, and then my troop were transferred to Kokong province. It was in 1976. Yes, that was in late 1976 or nearly 1977. I cannot recall it very well.
Thank you for attempting to clarify that. You told my colleague yesterday, I believe, that when you went to Koh Kong, you were transferred with 1.5 regiment, and in your first statement with the investigators in question and answer number 1, E3/80, you indicated that there were approximately 2,700 soldiers. Is that correct, that you transferred together with some 2,700 soldiers?
Bad.
Well, these 2,700 soldiers were stationed close to my regiment, but then they suffered from malaria. Then most of them had to return back, and there left only a few hundreds there.
So how large was the force that you were commanding in Koh Kong from 1976 onwards?
People
2,700 soldiers.
Thank you. You also told the investigators in your first interview, E3/424, in question and answer 7, that while working in Koh Kong, you became the deputy commander of Division 1. Who appointed you as deputy commander of Division 1?
The appointment was made by the divisional commander and the West Zone Secretary.
Now, we know that Suong was the division commander from your testimony yesterday. And in your statement that I cited earlier, at answer number 6, you said that the West Zone Secretary was Chu Chet, alias C. So is that the person, the Zone Secretary, who appointed you Deputy Division Commander together with Suong?
Yes.
Thank you. You indicated also that in that same answer, so E3/424, answer number 6, that Ta Suong became the Division 1 commander and also a member of the Zone Committee. Who appointed him to be a member of the Zone Committee?
As far as I knew, the appointment was made by Tamok.
The next question and answer in your statement, E3/424, again document E3/424, apologise, E3/424, question and answer number 7. Here you say that in Kok Hong province, the army had the duty to protect sea and land territory, and there was fighting with Thai soldiers for 1 week consecutively. Were these your responsibilities in the Kok Hong province to protect the sea and land territory?
Yes, that is correct.
And in relation to the protection of the sea, how did you protect the sea border?
For the protection of the sea, we did have ship, and we had infantry stationed on the islands and along the coastal line, and a lot of troops were on mobile.
In your second OCIJ statement, E3/80, question and answer number 1, you say that there was another event. Our Khmer people wanted to flee to Thailand. Could you describe what this was? What was the event where people were attempting to flee to Thailand?
Before my arrival and took charge of the battlefield in Kok Hong, people had been evacuated from the provincial town. They had already left. They also left Tropang Ru and along those islands, and they were sent to the rear at the Srai Umbal. So there were no people living in the area that we had our soldiers stationed.
How did you know that Khmer people wanted to flee to Thailand?
I did not know how people fled to Thailand. Sometimes we saw them in the forest and we returned them back to the rear. And there was no proper path to travel. There were no boats for them to cross the sea. So usually they would travel in the forest along the trail.
How often did this happen? How often did you find people attempting to flee and then return them to the rear?
Not that often. Sometimes we spotted one or two of them. They did not have food to eat, so we gave them food, and then we brought them to our barrack and later returned them to the cooperative.
Were you given any orders about what you should do if you encounter these people trying to flee?
There was no order, but as we spotted them, we brought them back, and we also made a report to the division, and the division then instructed us to bring them back to the rear.
How did you report to the division? What means did you use?
The report was made via the mobile radio communication and telecrime.
សារទូលេខ
We also use telecrime.
So do I understand correctly that you communicated with Ta Suong by telegram and radio from Koh Kong? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Yesterday, when you were being questioned by my colleague, you said that while you were guarding the coastline in that period, you received orders from the division, and the division got its orders from the general staff. Did I understand that answer correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
How did the division communicate with general staff? Did they also use telegram, or were there also other ways of communicating?
They used telecrime, and sometimes vehicles were used as he went to report it directly to the general staff.
And do you recall who was in charge of the general staff?
It was Son Sen who was in charge of the general staff together with Ta Mok.
Did you ever receive any orders from the general staff?
No, I did not receive any direct order, I only received order from the division secretary.
Now, you've told us that you were responsible for the maritime border. You described the ships and the troops stationed on the islands. Were you responsible for all of the islands off Cambodian coast, or were there any other military units in the area?
My target was between Koh Sadat Island to Koh Kong and Koh Yong, which was close to the Thai maritime border.
And what about other islands further south from your area? Were they protected by any other military divisions or units?
From Koh Sadat to Koh Rong to the south, that is toward Kampong Saum and Koh Pulawai. They were under the patrol of Division 3, where Tamut was the commander.
Did you coordinate your work, or did you communicate with Division 3?
Yes, there was communication at the regimental level, but the division commander never came to meet us.
And what did you communicate about?
We cooperated with Division 3 at the regimental level. We got to know one another, so then we could familiar ourselves with our tasks and their tasks, and not to overlap our responsibility.
Now, you've described for us your telegram communication with Ta Song. And you also gave some information on this in your third OCIJ statement, E3/73, in question and answer 5 and 6. In number 6, you said, I always reported by telegrams to the division chairman. Once in every 3 or 4 months, I attended a meeting only if there was a zone meeting because it was very far from Koh Kong, it was difficult to travel by sea. And then the last sentence, the telegraph report was made daily if there was a border situation with Thailand. So if I can just start first with telegraphs. Do I understand correctly that you reported daily to Suwon if there were problems at the border with Thailand?
Yes, that is correct.
Did you also communicate by telegraph with the regiments belonging to Division 3?
Yes, that is also correct.
Did Ta Suwon ever come to Koh Kong to supervise and give orders or meet with you?
During the 3 years' time that I stayed, he went there only once.
Now, returning briefly to your work in protecting the sea and the islands, were there ever situations where you captured boats or ships on the sea?
We captured some fishing boats belong to Thai people.
What was the reason that you captured those fishing boats?
They encroach into our territory water to engage in their fishing.
Were there any orders to capture boats that are encroaching into Cambodian waters?
Yes, there was an order to such a degree by the division.
And what were you required to do once you captured the boats?
When the boat was captured, we would keep the boat, and for those who were on the boat, they would be sent to Kampong Sao.
Let me rephrase, where in Kampong Som were they sent?
They were sent to Ta Seung's place at that division headquarters.
So was Ta Seung also based in Kampong Som.
In fact, his office was in Prey Nup, but he usually was in Kampong Som as well.
Did you ever discuss with Sung what happened to those fishermen who were sent down to Kampong Som?
No, I did not discuss with him. What I informed him was that we captured some Thai fishermen and he instructed us to send them to him. And I then returned to my work, my place.
Thank you. Did you ever encounter any Vietnamese boats?
Occasionally we saw Vietnamese boats. Sometimes we spotted once a month. Sometimes we captured it. Sometimes they fled.
And those that you captured, who were the people on those boats?
They were Vietnamese people, there were women, there were children, and there were men, they could be husbands and wives, but usually those boats were of a small size.
And what did you do with those people, the men, women and children, the Vietnamese people?
They were also sent to Kampong Som.
Do you know what those people were doing? Were they also fishing, or were they doing other activities at sea?
Their destination was to go to Thailand.
ហើយគាត់មិនសូវចេះ
But because they did not speak Khmer that fluently, I could not fully understand when they spoke.
Thank you for being comprehensive in your answers. Why were these boats captured?
We captured those boats as they encroach our territorial waters. So we needed to capture them and question them.
When you questioned them, did you provide any reports to Suong about information received and people captured, etc.?
When we captured the boat and the people on the boat, I reported it to the division. But because of the difficulty in communication, they were sent further to Kampong Sao.
Thank you. And just one more question on that. As far as you know, were reports given by Suwon to General Staff about those boats that were being captured?
Regarding the capture of a boat, I would report by a telegram to the division, but I did not have the knowledge whether the division would report it to the General Staff.
Thank you. When you discussed with the investigators your transfer to Kokong, and this is in statement E3/80, question and answer number 1, you said the following: a month after I arrived in Kokong, Nick, the Sector 37 Secretary, Ran, original name was Iv, the Deputy Sector Secretary, and Iv, the member in charge of the sector military, were removed. When they were removed, I knew that they were sent to the zone, but I did not know the reason of their removal. How did you find out that these 3 people from the Sector 37 committee had been removed? How did you find that out?
The removal of Nhec, Eve, was known to me by the sector soldiers, as some of those sector soldiers told me about that.
And just, if I can confirm with you the structure of the zone, in your second interview, the one we just discussed, E3/80, in question and answer number 22 and 23, you discussed the structure of the West Zone. And you said that there were 3 sectors in the zone: Sector 31, Kampong Chnan Province; Sector 32, Kampong Speu Province; and Sector 3, Kok Kong Province. Then you explained further on that it was Sector 37 that was Kok Kong Province. So I just want to make sure we have that correct. It was those 3 sectors, 31, 32, and 37, which were part of the West Zone.
បាទចឹងមែន
Yes, that is correct. The President, thank you. The time is now appropriate for the morning adjournment. The chamber will adjourn now until 10 to 11. Court officer is instructed to facilitate the break for the witness and his duty counsel and have him back in this courtroom before 10 to 11. The court is now adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ